Pakistan has had a tough few years since the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 2021. Despite maintaining relatively cordial relations with the Taliban throughout the American invasion, much to Washington's irritation, once the Taliban have retaken power, relations immediately deteriorated, largely because the Taliban refused to kick out the Pakistani-Taliban, or TTP, an Islamist terror group that's waged a bloody and costly insurgency against the Pakistani state for over a decade now. And there have been regular skirmishes between the Pakistani security forces and the Taliban, or TTP, along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border ever since. But things really kicked off in late December, when Pakistan responded to a deadly TTP attack with a series of airstrikes inside Afghanistan. Somewhat ominously, in the first few days of January, the Taliban responded by deploying some 15,000 troops to the border regions, while Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said that Pakistan cannot move forward without crushing the Taliban. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Pakistan relations with the Taliban have deteriorated since 2021, why tensions have flared yet again, and what might happen next. Let's start with some context. For most of recent history, the Taliban and Pakistan have actually been pretty good mates. The Taliban were originally a faction within the Afghan Mujahideen, who were supported by both the United States and Pakistan in their fight against the Soviets in the 80s. Pakistan continued to support the group after its emergence in 1994, and many of its recruits even came from Afghan refugees studying in Islamic religious schools, known as madrasas in Pakistan. In fact, when the Taliban conquered Kabul in 1996 and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, it received international recognition from just 3 countries: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Pakistan. Ever since, Pakistan has maintained relations with the Taliban, even after the US invaded and forced the Taliban out of Kabul in 2001. Unsurprisingly, this became a point of contention between Pakistan and the US, but Pakistan was unwilling to cut ties with the Taliban for at least 3 reasons. First, the two countries have close cultural and historical links. The Taliban are predominantly ethnic Pashtuns, and Pashtuns make up a majority of not just southern Afghanistan, but also parts of northern Pakistan, which is one of the reasons creating a functional Afghanistan-Pakistan border has been so difficult. Secondly, the Pakistani army and intelligence services see the Taliban as a regional counterbalance against India and operate pretty independently from the Pakistani government. This means that even if the US could convince the Pakistani government to cut ties with the Taliban, this doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be able to change the army's foreign policy. But the third and perhaps most important reason that Pakistan maintained ties with the Taliban was stability. Even before they returned to power, the Taliban still had influence in southern Afghanistan, and Pakistan needed to keep them on side in order to prevent them from hosting and exporting terror groups from Afghanistan into Pakistan, including, most notably, the Pakistani-Taliban, or TTP, who have waged a violent insurgency against the Pakistani state since 2007. In this respect, Pakistan's support for the Taliban now looks prescient, given that they've quickly regained control of the country after America's hurried withdrawal in 2021. When the Taliban returned to power, Pakistani officials apparently expected the Taliban to repay them for their support by cracking down on other terror groups operating out of Afghanistan, including the TTP. But that's not really what happened. Instead, the Taliban mediated negotiations between the TTP and Pakistan, which led to a ceasefire from August until December 2021. But once the ceasefire expired, the TTP restarted their attacks inside Pakistan with increasing frequency. Relations between Pakistan and the Taliban continued to deteriorate throughout 2022 and 2023, with occasional skirmishes between Pakistani security forces and Taliban, or TTP-linked groups, along the border. Pakistani politicians and officials accuse the Taliban of providing safe haven for and even supporting the TTP, while the Taliban accuse Pakistan of allowing the US to operate drones out of Pakistan to target suspected terrorists within Afghanistan, including the July 2022 drone strike that killed al-Qaeda's leader in Kabul. The two countries also have a long-standing disagreement over the border itself, known as the Durand Line, which was drawn by the British in the late 19th century, and which the Taliban reject on the grounds that it artificially divides the Pashtun community. Tensions came to a head in late 2023 when Pakistan's government abruptly announced that roughly 2 million undocumented Afghans living in Pakistan had to leave the country by November or else face deportation. The Taliban described the proposal as unacceptable, but Pakistan went ahead with it anyway and has so far deported over 500,000 Afghans. Skirmishes continued into 2024 and escalated dramatically towards the end of the year. This coincided with an uptick in violence by Baloch separatist groups like the Balochistan Liberation Front in Pakistan's southwestern border regions, which is where most ethnic Baloch people live. And 2024 actually ended up being a particularly deadly year for Pakistani security services. According to Pakistan's Center for Research and Security Studies, 685 Pakistani troops were killed in counter-terrorism operations last year, up 66% compared to 2023, and the highest figure since 2015. Fighting between Pakistan and the TTP escalated in late December after an attack by the TTP on a Pakistani outpost in South Waziristan on December 21st, which resulted in the death of at least 16 soldiers. Pakistan reacted with a series of airstrikes in Afghanistan's Barmail district, the third time that Pakistan has carried out strikes inside Afghanistan since the Taliban took over. Pakistan claims to have eliminated at least 20 terrorists, but the Taliban said that the death toll was much higher, and a number of women and children had also been killed. Over the next few days, there were constant skirmishes between the Taliban and Pakistan forces along the border, and on December 30th, the Taliban deployed 15,000 troops to the area. Now, it's hard to verify reports, but it looks like the Taliban and TTP have successfully captured a handful of Pakistani border posts, and tensions have continued to rise since the new year. On January 2nd, Pakistan claimed that the Taliban were demanding 10 billion Pakistani rupees for the TTP's withdrawal, and a day later, Pakistan's Prime Minister declared that Pakistan cannot move forward without crushing the Taliban. So, what happens next? Well, tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan have escalated quite a few times since the Taliban took power in 2021, but so far a full-scale war has been avoided. Nonetheless, even if this latest round of violence doesn't lead to a full-on war, it's clear that the current setup is unsustainable, and if the frequency of TTP attacks inside Pakistan continues to increase, as it did in 2024, then a full-on war will become more likely over time. The dangers here are also exacerbated by domestic dynamics in both countries. The Taliban are obviously unpopular and incompetent, but Pakistan's government is also struggling with long-running economic and political crises of its own. After all, it had to be bailed out by the IMF for the 24th time last year, and the current government has resorted to jailing their main opponent, Imran Khan. The risk here is that both governments might be tempted to use a war to unify their divided countries and distract from their domestic woes. It's not just domestic, though. All over the world, there are people vying for power and for control. The question is then, who will come out on top? Who is the world's most influential person? That's what we're trying to find out with our official most influential person list, which we need your help with. So if you want to help us decide on who the most influential person in the entire world is, then you can click the link in the description to cast your own ballot for your personal top 10, helping to shape the overall ranking. And your vote is super important, but voting closes on January 15th. So do your democratic duty and cast your ballot for the world's most influential person. Also, if you're wondering why we're doing this, it's for the next issue of our magazine, Too Long. That's because our next issue will contain the entire list, as well as fascinating articles about the top 25. Those won't just be boring profiles about each of the people either. There'll be interesting stories about who these people really are, where their power truly resides, and how they wield their influence. If you want to pre-order a copy of the magazine, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. Oh, and if you pick up a premium copy of the magazine, you'll also get access to our internal awards ceremony, where the team will first learn and react to your votes live. Plus, you'll also get to watch TLDR team members sit down to discuss their own personal lists, fight it out, and try and agree for once. You'll also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, and get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Anyway, to find out more, cast your vote, or order a copy, you can click the various links in the description.